right, feminists, you people have jammed your foot in one time too many. After the last Wren vs. Feminism video, I promised myself I wouldn't do any more, despite Kage's urgings, and even open encouragement in the form of hunting down some really good stories. Now I'm going to have to break that promise, because you people are such fucking hypocrites that it's long past time this was explained to you. A little bird dropped by not long ago with a news story about a recent US federal lawsuit filed by a man that has, in fact, been sexually assaulted. Much as I was inclined to take the article's word for it, I decided to do the due diligence anyway, and actually read the lawsuit and attachments the male party filed in federal court on the 29th of May, 2015. Here I thought Anita Sarkeesian was bad. These people make her look like a little girl with a basket full of cream puffs in a meadow. I'm not sure it's as much about the way John was punished as it was the statement that he was responsible whilst being so drunk that he wouldn't really have had much of a mind anyway. Had the roles been reversed, even with a single drink in her, they would have patted her on the head and hung him from the nearest yardarm. What am I saying? They did that anyway. The woman in question, identified as Sandra Jones, lied to the investigator sent, did not disclose her communications with other parties, hid at least one witness, and admitted her crime shortly after it had occurred. Just to top it off with a pretty pink bow, she indicated that he was too far gone to even get a proper erection. Do any of you know just how soused one has to be for that to happen? I've seen men in that state, and to call them capable of giving consent in any way, shape, or form requires a stretch from here to bloody China. Kage's been in that state at least once that I can attest to, and before my forced bout with maternity leave, I saw drunks in such a condition in the tank on a daily basis. When you can step up to the bars with these things under a police uniform, and get no more than a vacant glance and maybe a drooling groan, you should know that sex is the last thing on their minds. By the time a human gets to that point, they're far more interested in continuing to breathe in and out. I'm surprised she managed to get enough of a response out of him to give him a blowjob, if we're being entirely honest. During the hour or two after a drunk has finished vomiting their toenails, and usually the hour or so before that, they're entirely incapable of making any kind of decision beyond beer, drink. Because a human of less than a year old can do the same thing, and they're more mentally capable of consent than anyone that could be described as blackout drunk. The problem here is that Amherst was under pressure from the federal government to beef up its sexual abuse standards, and dealing with their due zombies that like to throw protests instead of parties. Every person involved with the investigation and subsequent hearing was subject to dismissal if they didn't come to the right conclusion, with the exception of the accuser. That's right. The stupid little girl that was the perpetrator of the crime that had actually been committed. So much so, that she sent a text message bitching to another student that it had taken her until 5 in the morning to get the man she'd been bothering before to come over and bed her. Now, before you start running off about victim blaming, she invited this particular individual over within minutes after finishing with her victim. Her previous behavior hasn't been taken into account, although it was described in the lawsuit by another female as a point of character. There's a link at the fold so you can read it yourself. She also didn't bother to file a complaint until nearly 2 years later, after the rules on sexual assault hearings had changed. She was urged to do this by a student known in the paperwork as LR, who was at the time a member of a special oversight committee on sexual misconduct, and a witness at the hearing for the complainant. Whereupon LR lied to the investigator, if she could be called that, about a confession Doe had supposedly given her somewhat earlier admitting to sexually assaulting Jones. Her testimony was deemed to lack credibility, but at this point, the damage has already been done. As the first case heard under the new rules, he was first fast-tracked, denied a lawyer or other counsel, and then his support advisor filled his head full of rubbish. Doe had less than a week to gather witnesses, dig up evidence, and prepare a defense. Not that he had the skills or training to even know how to begin. Had I been Doe, I would have taken the entire mess to the state police, and let them sort it out. I'm not sure if he could have avoided an arrest on suspicion of sexual assault, but he would have stood a much better chance in a court of law than he did in that hearing room. Every constitutional guarantee we have was suspended for this mockery, and when the specter of possible exculpatory evidence was raised in the hearing, it was let pass without comment. That being a reference to the text messages I mentioned earlier. The complainant mentioned them obliquely, and no line of questioning was pursued thereafter. Doe was found guilty by a preponderance of the evidence, in which the board acknowledged that he was drunk, and stated that his actual condition was not an excuse. Excuse me? I sense great hypocrisy here, as according to feminism, we lose our agency the moment we tip back that first glass. Men, on the other hand, seem to keep theirs until the moment of death, or so this would indicate. Never mind that the student handbook already specifically stated that being blackout drunk was an automatic failure of consent. Jones changed her story several times, from he initiated to she did, and withdrew consent during the act. I would be surprised if any act on his part had actually taken place. Here's the way I piece this together. Shithead finds her roommate's boyfriend wasted out of his mind, figures that he wouldn't report her to his girlfriend if he didn't remember it, and tried in vain to suck him up. She then sent him packing, and messaged her friend downstairs to lament her utter failure, followed by pushing the man she wanted in the first place into scratching her itch by way of text messages. When that man finally showed up, it took her more than an hour to talk him into it, and then bitched that it took so damned long. There are 3 parts to the standard for sexual assault. One was flatly impossible, that being consent on his part. The bit about knowingly using more force than required for the act to take place. In that state, Doe would barely be able to find his own feet, never mind know how much force to use in getting a bloody blowjob. I've never had any force applied to me during such an event, at least. As for the last, him knowing that she was incapacitated, well, she wasn't. However, if you reverse it, and apply the standard as if he were the complainant, then all 3 apply. According to the student handbook, blackout drunks cannot by definition give consent. She knew he was incapacitated, and no one that drunk is in any condition to put up a fight. All she would have needed was to put a firm hand on him, or straddle him in some way, and he was going nowhere. Get someone wrecked enough, and they could be tied down in any one of 100 ways, and not even realize they can struggle. The booze alone was enough to tie him down as surely as if she'd used a heavy chain. People in that condition are extremely pliable and cooperative because they're operating on fucking autopilot. They will do what you tell them, when you tell them, as long as they have enough unpickled brain cells left to comprehend what you said. I'm 165 centimeters and was at most 60 kilos before I got pregnant. But I had no difficulty whatsoever leading men outweighing me by as much as 3 or 4 to 1 into the drunk tank, or back out again after they'd slept it off. Not once in 4 years working patrol did I get worse than a badly slurred catcall from any of them, and when I did, it was from dipshits that were recovering, not those that I was storing at the time. You want to know what's even sadder? I got it worse from the women than I ever did the men. Even the really belligerent male drunks were easy to subdue by doing nothing more than shifting my weight. The female ones tended to get rowdy faster, and squirm more. And they just adore biting and pulling hair. All they have to do is get their hands in front of them, and they're at least going to try it. Frankly, I hope he wins. In a federal court, you have 2 appeals, one to the Federal Appeals Court, and another to the Supreme Court. Regardless of who wins in the district court, I expect it'll be appealed at least once. Amherst might not be willing to risk a Supreme Court ruling, but I'll just bet Doe would. Title IX needs to be challenged, and this could be an ideal case with which to do so. You little girls need to get your shit together and stop being absolute morons. In a court of law, with the ability to subpoena records and the right to have competent counsel. The ability to hide evidence would have been extremely limited on the part of the complainant, and he could have gotten redress for his issues thereafter with little or no hindrance. Because the particulars of the crime that was actually committed aren't in dispute. She did take him into the room she shared with his girlfriend, she did give him fellatio, she was not incapacitated, and he was. Not even the board called those 4 things into question. Nor is it in question that she was willingly intimate with another man in the hours after the supposed rape took place. Her behavior before the event is not relevant. Her behavior and demeanor afterwards is. I'm not blaming the victim here, I'm advocating for him. Amherst blamed the victim, and the feminist fucktards roasted him on a spit. Several someones over there are lucky I'm not the one signing arrest warrants. Even if she had managed to conceal the text messages revealing her knowledge that she'd done something wrong, once he had that evidence in hand, he could have gone to a proper court with that evidence, and no doubt have secured an overturn of his conviction. Amherst flatly denied him, after publicly marking him out as a sex offender and not only causing him to miss his finals for his final term there, but marring his academic record by recording a disciplinary expulsion. No school will take him after that. Unless this travesty is addressed, and a uniform system put into place, his life is over before it even begins. Even if everything goes perfectly for him now, he's lost years of his life to the person that forced him into sexual contact. Now for the last interesting tidbit, the little girl that assaulted him is not named in the lawsuit. Only the officials that were involved in the hearing. If that's not magnanimous, I don't know what is. She and Ella are directly responsible for his situation. They should appear, and do not. Gentlemen, much as it pains me to do this, I have some advice for you when you go to college. Stay away from alcohol until after graduation, and practice absolute abstinence. Or if you simply must scratch that itch, don't do it anywhere near the school. It's the only way you're going to avoid this guy's fate. My fellow females can permanently fuck you over with 3 words and half an hour of lying they're letting you have your way. It's not worth the risk. If you see a woman in a gender studies class headed towards you, run. Run as fast and as hard as you can. Don't look back until you're on the other side of town. Stay clear of any protests that involve even the thought of gender, oppression, patriarchy, race, or sex. Don't even go there. You are not safe. Go to school, stay near the other guys that have brain cells, and learn something useful. Then find a nice girl at work or something. By then, maybe they'll have matured into something that might treat you like a human being. I got over the whole idea of being oppressed by men because labia at 14. Most of these won't until they're clear of the social justice programming institutions that colleges are quickly turning into. Oh, and just in case you're all wondering, Doe isn't Caucasian. He's a first-generation Asian American. Your skin color is not a defense, and your penis is proof of guilt in these places. Don't show it to anyone, and stay away from the women in the social sciences department. If you don't, you will live to regret it. As for you stupid little girls, and your unfortunate male allies, I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I don't need your feminism. Nobody does, least of all you. Put the megaphone on the ground, and step away. You're destroying everything you touch. I shouldn't have to give anyone the advice I just gave the young men. We teach them from the cradle not to rape, not to hit us, and to defer to us in small ways that are, for us, at least mildly beneficial. We have to work together, or it all goes away. You don't want to make less money over your lifetime than they do? Don't get pregnant, work in a field that pays well, and don't be a fucking moron. I'm getting paid for my required time off, but I'm only going to be gone 8 months or so. I'm not going to take 20 or 30 years off for my children to grow up and leave the nest, and then expect to drop right back in at a rate of pay consummate to what I'd be getting if I worked that entire time, plus a fucking bonus because I made a conscious choice to stay home and laze my life away. I've already made all the arrangements for my children and not only their father, but his family on the chance that I'll be killed in a line of duty, and they're going to take them while I'm out taking the risk that some gun bunny with an attitude problem is going to decide that I'm a target at the range. I'm well paid for that risk, more than your average social worker, in fact. If you want to make what a man makes in a lifetime, then come on down to the precinct. I'll take you out in a squad car with me to do the job, and see how long you last. Every time the captain saddles me with one of you twits, you snap before lunchtime. The first perp nearly always does your heads in. By the time you've seen the third one, you'll be punching out, going home, and not coming back. You roam around in packs, without the courage of your convictions, ready to run back to your hug boxes the nanosecond you see anything with a spine. I don't carry signs to affect change. I carry a gun. I also carry with me the hope that I never have to use it. Signs can do that, if you have the right one and the courage to face the consequences of wielding it. So far, you're 0 for 2. You won't forgive me for the fuck you are about to receive, and I don't want you to. I want you to grow the fuck up and realize that everyone is important, regardless of skin color, genital structure, or anything else. White, black, yellow, pink, or lime fucking green. Gay or straight, male, female, or anything in between. Without all of us, none of us survive. Grow the fuck up, you sniveling wretch. If you want to whine about patriarchy, then do it somewhere else. Go to Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, Egypt, Pakistan and Syria. They could do with a little feminism. If you're going to do that, however, do consult with based mum, and follow her advice to the letter. You'll live longer. Treat men the way you do here, and they will fucking end you. Then come back and talk to me about patriarchy and how bad you have it here.